Hi there. We're going to spend a bit of time going over Analytics for Spire. I'm just going to start up the application. Right now I'm in trial mode, so I'm just going to accept that. And that brings up our multi-company list, which has been set up by setting up data sources pointing to the various different Spire databases. I've got a bunch of different Spire databases set up, but I'm going to start by logging into a demonstration one. And let's go over a bunch of different things about analytics. To start out with, let's talk a little bit. I'll just size this so that we can see it on the screen properly. Let's bring this over here. Okay, so first question is really, what is Analytics for Spire? Analytics for Spire is a bunch of different things. It's a reporting application, it's a analysis application, it allows you to print reports and as of this new version, even design reports. The important thing to know about this application, though, is that it's not just a report writer. The whole idea here is to try and allow you to answer questions quickly without a lot of work and on an ongoing basis as your data changes. So that's what we're going to take a look at here is a bunch of different modules and sort of ideas behind how this process works. Let's start by loading up the summary module, and let's basically grab data. So what that does is it goes off to your network or on your local machine, and it grabs up the data and then brings it into a format that we've got set up by default. This particular format is showing me information about customers and their particular purchases year to date for 2002 month over month. So here we can basically see and sort and group and do all kinds of different things with the grid to see this information. So here we have sales analysis, and the same principle applies in a bunch of different modules. You can do the same thing for job costs, for example. You can do that for payroll, which is particularly effective if you've got hourly employees at different rates. You can do it for inventory receipts. Same basic concept. Just go ahead and get data, and that loads up based on whatever prescribed format we've established. Now the neat thing about this is that these are just default formats. I can save my own layouts and change them around to whatever particular interest that I'm focused on. Let's go back to sales analysis, and I'll show you another example. This is by customer. I can go ahead and switch layouts over to committed quantity by part number, and now I'm seeing the committed quantity month versus year by part number. Or I can switch over to sold quantity by year and month, and there's the sold quantity by year and month. These are all what are called stored layouts, but from here I can basically change these layouts in whatever way I want. So let's reset the default. There's our default layout, and let's just kind of give you an idea of the cool things you can do here. For example, if let's say I want to do a basic analysis, but I don't want to do it for customers. I just want to start with a this year comparison, and let's go ahead and switch to last year to load up that data as well, and we'll get data again. And what we'll see now is what we're looking at is sales for last year versus this year. Let's go ahead and select that information, and we can see that automatically the system graphs that information for us. So that's last year versus this year, and I can see it in a bunch of different formats, in a pie chart format, in a bar chart format. These are all default reports that are run for us, or graphs that are run for us. If at some point you want to print that out, you can go ahead and just double click on it, and that pops up, and you can print that out for comparison purposes. So lots of neat tools here. The whole principle behind the application is that you can drill down further on this, though. For example, I might be looking at this and think, okay, this is great. I can see that I'm doing, relatively speaking, particularly well this year relative to last year, but I want to break that down now and look at that based on product code. So drag product code over, and now if I scroll down, let's get that graph a little smaller, I can scroll down and I can look specifically at trends within product categories. So let's say for speakers, for example, let's look at how speakers are doing. And we can see the trend line here for speakers is a little bit different than the trend line overall. I had a really strong year last year. It looks like this year started strong, but my last completed month was around May, and it looks like things are kind of tailing off or sort of heading in the direction of being similar to last year. So that gives me information right away. I can start asking questions. Are we not pushing speakers hard enough? Is there more that we should be doing? The neat thing here is I can take that even further and drill down on it and say, okay, based on this, what is happening? I can see in January we had a strong month. February, March, and April we had fairly strong months, but April starts to tail off. So I can drill down and see what we're selling in April or what we're not selling. Just double click on that, and that gives me a quick detail view based on how I built the detail view of what was selling. And I can customize this layout as well. I can look at, let's say for example, particular part numbers. I can group based on that, and now I can see which part numbers I'm selling and which part numbers I'm not. So for example, SP101, I sold 52 during that time frame, and here's the total value of SP101 within that product category. So again, month over month I can look at that. Maybe if I'm particularly concerned about SP101, I can look at that part number directly. I can say, okay, well, in that period I sold 52 SP101s. But if I go back and look at April here, and I scroll down to SP101s, I can see that I sold 54. So, okay, the problem obviously is not in SP101s. Either sales didn't go up or down, they're just sort of flat for that. So I can kind of drill down on these things. I can take that further and drag the part number over. I might say, okay, well, maybe I want to focus on part numbers, and I can go even further and say, okay, within product category, let's grab the part number and put that in here, and now I can see the breakdown specifically within each category. So again, very useful for me to quickly, you notice I didn't have to do a whole lot of setup or work here, very quickly look at values simply by dragging and dropping. So for example, I can say, well, okay, I'm looking at it that way and that's interesting, but let's change tax. I might even say, for example, in this case, this is important. Let's save that layout and call that product code part by year and month. And I'll save that. And let's take the product code out and the part number out, and let's look at this by salesperson. And now I can basically look at the salespeople breakdown. Actually, let's show you the field list while we're at it. Salesperson actually is useful, but I don't know who the salespeople names are. So let's pop up the field list. We'll bring that over here. And there's special fields in here that concatenate things. I'm looking specifically for salesperson details. I'll put that over here. I'll remove that, and I'll size the grid so now I can see the actual salespeople names. So now I can start looking at it by salesperson. So for example, how did Christine Davidson do? And again, highlight, and I can see, well, okay, it looks like her trend line started again great, but then dropped off partway through the year and dropped off hard. Versus Catherine Kurtz, for example, look at her sales, and it looks like she's staying fairly steady. Her sales aren't as high, but she's staying steady in terms of what she's selling. Versus Donald Carpenter, and again we can see different trend lines. And this is where we can get into asking questions and looking at how people are doing versus products are doing versus territories are doing. Anything that basically is a criterion that we saw in this field list is available as a criterion for the purposes of doing this analysis. So very, very powerful, very, very useful, different kinds of analyses that you can do here. Let's jump out of there. At any point you can filter these lists as well, so I can apply what's called a filter. I'm going to show you that in the details grid to kind of give you an idea. But here the notion basically is you load up your information, and you can use your different layouts which you've established in the way that you see fit, appropriate for analysis, and switch quickly between them, analyzing information in ways that make sense to you. At any point you can print this. So if I go ahead and click print, Now I can get a printed document that I can go ahead and print out and make notes on, go ask questions, review things. I can also export that to Excel. And when I export to Excel, I can again work on that document. The advantage obviously to working within analytics is it's real time relative to your data. So your data is changing on a daily basis, even many times during the day. Excel basically, once you dump it to Excel, becomes something that you can make notes on and work from, but it's not live relative to the data like the analytics product is. And that's really the true power, is the speed and ability to pull in that information quickly. Lots of tools available as well. I can hide information if totals aren't particularly relevant to me and I want to look. And again, I can modify how I want to look at things over time. So here might be an easier way for me to quickly look at how the trends of things are doing over time. So I can look here and see how I'm doing relative to month over month for the sales of different items in different product categories. There are other tools that are available. If I take this and drag this down here, one quick thing I can do that's handy is put on what's referred to as a rule. Here I'll put a DataBar on, and what this DataBar does is shows me, relatively speaking, high selling versus low selling items. So if I scroll down here, I can see, okay, the items that have like larger bars than smaller bars are items I might want to focus on as being key items. Obviously speakers are a big part of our unit sales, so here I can see it looks like we had some pretty big unit sales relative to last year, but that those unit sales are dropping off, and that's just another way of viewing things. And those of course save with the layouts as well. So if I save that and reload that, let's go ahead and do that. Let's say product category by year. When I switch back and then switch back to product category by year, product category by year, it remembers those data bars for me. Product category by year. And if I scroll down, I can see that again. So lots of tools available, lots of things you can do in the summary grid that are very powerful for helping you analyze data. The detail grid is kind of part and parcel of this process. It's the same concept as loading the data into here, except that in the data grid, let's move this down here. Let's get data. In the detail grid, what you're looking at is details first and then summaries. So for example, if I wanted to look by part number and scroll down, that automatically generates things like summaries for me. So here I'm looking at all my CD204s, here's my committed quantity, and here's my sell price total. Again, the neat thing about detail grids is they have the same kind of tools that the summary grid has. I can save layouts, I can reset layouts, I can load layouts. I've got a default layout in here I can show you called highlight discounts. And what that does is shows me the grid but highlights those items where there was a discount given. So what's that telling me? That's telling me as I scroll through this list, and I can group this as well, as I scroll through this list, these highlighted items are all the cases where the CD204 was sold but there was a discount given. So the sell price total was this, 2410.92. However, there was an invoice discount given. The non-discounted price would have been this. So again, very, very useful. I can compare what I would have made had I sold the item in its normal price versus what I would have made if I'd sold the item without the discounts. So how much am I giving away in terms of discounts? So again, these are all just tools or things you can build. This is a layout I built specifically for the purposes of telling me, okay, what am I losing in terms of discounts that are being given. A common thing that a lot of businesses want to pay attention to is not only this, but they want to show, and I'll bring this up to give you an example, salesperson details. Let's say salesperson, and I'll put that up here underneath the part number. So here's a neat thing. Basically that shows me by part number and then by salesperson what's being sold, but it quickly highlights for me which salespeople are giving the biggest discounts. So salesperson 10, obviously, when they're selling CD800s, is giving a lot of discounts. Had they not given discounts, they would have been selling for the total of the sales of those CD 800s would have been $267.19, but they gave away about $600 worth of discounts in the sale of those items. And maybe that's important and good, and maybe that's something you need to be concerned about. So again, these are things that from a management standpoint you can look at as an overview. Here, salesperson 1 selling CD 204s gave away approximately $1,000 worth of discount in order to make those sales. So again, is that good? Is that bad? Those are things you can monitor on an ongoing basis. Let's reset the layout and go back to our default layout. Some nice tools in the grid here. Let's best fit the columns, so that shows us the best sort of view of the columns relative to their size. And by default, it merges the cells to make it easier to view, and that in some views is easier, in some views is more complicated. I can toggle that on and off. So let's toggle cell merging, and now basically I can again arrange this grid in whatever way makes sense to me. Maybe in this case I'm particularly concerned about grouping by customer, so I'll group by customer first, and then within customer I want to sort by item description, for example. And then within item description I want to sort by committed quantity, and I want it to be highest to lowest, so I'll just click that again. So here I can see by customer items based on description, and then within description the highest selling items down to the lowest selling items. And as we can see, these totals automatically are calculated for us both at the bottom of the grid as well as within each group. And maybe I want to know within customer details the number of times lines on invoices appeared, so I'm going to put a count in there. And it might be important for me to know, for example, what the average selling price total was. Well, let's say what the average committed quantity was. So let's go ahead and put in something called a group summary. And I want to say committed quantity, and I want to know what the average was. And what that does, if I scroll up to the top of a group now, is tells me the average committed quantity, the average number of items sold on any given invoice for this customer was 5.8 or 6. So the customer generally buys an average of 6 items. That could be important information too. For example, Acme is roughly the same. However, AC Tech, when they buy items, they buy roughly 9 items when they're buying items on an invoice. So again, useful information. Like everything here, easy to print this. If I decide that this is a good layout for me, I can go ahead and save that layout and say customer item committed. I don't have to save the layout, I want to save it because I might want to use it again later, and I'll go ahead and print that. And what that does again is auto-generates a report for me, which shows all that information. This is kind of a tight report, so I might decide I want to take out things or modify this, or even create a report specifically for this purpose. So that's kind of an auto-generated report based on the grid, with page numbers and all that information. I can export that to Excel as well. Very easy, single click and it sends that to Excel. And there again, I can work forward from that for whatever purpose that I want. Maybe review stock, make notes, send that off to my salespeople, ask questions about the average line items, those kinds of things. One thing that you can do in all the modules that's very, very useful is you can also go ahead and put in information like custom calculated fields. Let me show you a quick example. Let's say I want to know what would have happened had I increased my sales, and let's make this a really simple example, for selling price total by a percentage. So let's say, let's call this sell plus. I'll call that a decimal field, and I'll add the custom field, and that field will be the sell price total. Let's go ahead and find that sell price total, and we'll multiply that times a factor. Let's say I want to see what happens if my sales go up by 1.2,
And just to make it look a little neater, let's round that to 2 decimal places. So what that does is adds this field to the end of the list, but I can use it wherever I want. So there's now my sell price total. If I increase my sell prices by 1.2, this is the number I expect to be getting in terms of sales, and that's based on the group as well as overall. Very, very simple example. What I may be doing in this example is modifying this further and saying within the expression that I want to do that for specific product categories, that I want to do it for specific customers. I might want to set a sales target for a particular salesperson by saying I want to see their sales increase by a particular percentage. So again, very, very easy and powerful way of creating an Excel-like formula that's stored as part of the layout. If I want to store that as part of the layout, I just simply say save layout, and I say I want that to be the customer item committed one, and actually while I'm at it, let's throw in DataBar. Let's say I want to conditionally format this, and let's do a different one. I want to manage the rule, and I want to say that I want to highlight it anytime sell price total is greater than $1,000, and I want to format that, and I want to fill it, and I want it to apply to the row. So there, I've got a quick way of basically allowing me to highlight those items when I'm scrolling through the list or looking at the report that shows me anytime when that item is more than $1,000 or less than a certain value or whatever. And again, those rules can get quite complex as well. So we'll save the layout again. And that's now part of that layout. So that if I go ahead and switch back, now I'm highlighting discounts in this layout. Whoops. Keep changing that. Now I'm highlighting discounts in this layout, or I can go back to the one where I'm looking at specifically those items by customer who are selling past a certain point. So again, very, very powerful things that you can do here. Eventually all the modules will have reporting. Right now a number of them do. This particular module, Sales Analysis, in addition to having the summary grid and the detail grid, also has reports. Reports are kind of the same thing in terms of pulling in data, except they have the advantage that they can be modified as printable reports, again with your own criteria, your own grouping, and so on. Let's show you a quick example. I'm going to go ahead and get data. That basically loads in sort of the raw data that I'm going to use for my reporting. And now I can, any one of the stored reports that I have, and we provide about a half a dozen different default reports, can be print previewed. And in the print preview, what you see is more of a classic report. So here are all the items based on profit, sorted by profit, first by part number. So here we can see your profit based on current cost. And if I scroll down to the end of C204s, there's the totals based on profit versus current cost, as well as the extended price, and that takes into account discounts and so on. This is stored as part of a layout, which is named right here, Sales by Item by Profit, and it's currently a 54-page report, or a fairly large report. So again, very, very useful. That's one report, but you can change that around. Here's a sales by territory code. So I can go ahead and print preview that one, and that's a stored report based on territory. So it's grouping based on territory and subtotaling based on territory and extending the price. This one is actually showing you whether or not there's an invoice discount at play for this particular line that we're looking at. So again, lots of default reports. The really cool part about this is any one of these default reports can be modified and saved as a different report for whatever purpose you see fit. How do you create a new report? There's a bunch of different ways. One way basically is highlight the report that's something like what you like. Let's say sales by product code. But instead of going into print preview, you go into design. And in the designer, you basically just specify how you want to change the report. And that can be as simple or as complex as you want. Let's just bring the designer into the window. So here now I can modify this to add fields, change the calculations. Maybe I want to say sales by product code plus, and let's size that so we can see it. And let's modify one of the fields. Let's say we'll go over to the field list. I can put on all these different fields that are available, but here let's look at the calculated fields. So we'll edit the calculated fields, and for the extended price field, let's modify this. So this is basically an extended price calculation that's taking into account discounts, but I can modify this further and say, okay, if the item is discountable, do this, versus if the item is not discountable, do something else, and I can modify that calculation if I want further. This is a little complicated, so I think I'll leave that one alone. Let's do something else. Let's add another field just to kind of show you how this process works. Let's say I want to just bold the customer name, something simple. Or we'll put a dashed border around it. We'll save this, and we'll call this plus, and we'll close the designer, and you'll see that's now been saved in the list as a new report, and we'll print preview it. Again, very simple. I didn't give a great example of some of the things you can do here, but I've changed the label here, and I've changed it so that I've grouped together customers in a slightly different way. So again, anything you want to change or anything you want to modify, you can do. If you want to take the time, you can go much farther and modify the report wholesale to remove fields, add fields, change fonts, do conditional formatting, all kinds of different things you can do within the report, much like Crystal Reports or other report writers. So that's a quick overview. Each module has generally a summary and a detail, and many of the modules currently have reports where you can modify your reports. The idea here is you're able to make decisions on an ongoing basis based on data changing, which can be quickly loaded into the application and reviewed on a regular basis. And that review can be daily, it can be monthly, it can be year over year. There's all kinds of different things you can do with the way that you look at this information, and that's powerful in terms of helping you make decisions on an ongoing basis that are really advantageous to your business.